March 15, 1997. Elena Vasquez had 30 seconds to make a choice that would define the next quarter century of her life. The phone call came through an encrypted line at 11:47 p.m. She could warn the world's most wanted drug lord about the car bomb or let justice take its course. She picked up the phone. She made the call. El Chapo lived. What Elena didn't know was that her anonymous tip would trigger a chain reaction that reached into the highest levels of the DEA. 3 agents died that night, instead of 1 cartel leader. Families were destroyed. Lives were rewritten. For 23 years, Elena believed she saved a monster to prevent collateral damage. She was wrong. She saved a monster who used her warning to become something far worse. And now, someone knows exactly what she did. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Weight of Secrets. Elena's hands trembled as she set down the secure phone that night in 1997, the dial tone echoing in the empty DEA field office like a death knell. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across classified files scattered on her desk. She had just committed treason, though she told herself it was mercy. The intelligence report lay open before her, surveillance photos of the modified Chevrolet Suburban, technical diagrams of the explosive device, estimated casualty radius. Rival cartel members had planted enough C4 under the driver's seat to level half a city block. When El Chapo turned that ignition key tomorrow morning, he wouldn't just die. His 3 young daughters, scheduled to accompany him to their grandmother's funeral, would die too. Elena closed her eyes and tried to convince herself she'd made the right choice. Children were children, no matter whose blood they carried. By dawn, everything had changed. The first reports came through official channels at 6:23 a.m. Explosion in Culiacan, multiple casualties. But instead of El Chapo's compound, a bomb had detonated outside a Catholic church where families gathered for morning mass. 14 dead, including 3 DEA agents whose cover identities had somehow been compromised. Elena's supervisor, Director Marcus Webb, stormed through the office like a man possessed. His usually pristine suit was wrinkled, his silver hair disheveled. He'd been on conference calls with Washington since the news broke. "Someone leaked the operation," he announced to the assembled intelligence team. His cold blue eyes swept the room, lingering on each face. "Someone with access to classified surveillance data," warned Guzman. "The bastard didn't just avoid the bomb, he redirected it, used our own intelligence to identify and eliminate our undercover assets." Elena's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering against the linoleum floor. Webb's gaze snapped to her, but she was already moving, grabbing paper towels, apologizing, playing the part of a clumsy analyst rattled by tragic news. Inside, her world was collapsing. The bomber had been captured alive, Webb continued. Under interrogation, he revealed that an anonymous caller had contacted El Chapo's security chief at 11:52 p.m. the previous night, 5 minutes after Elena's warning. The caller provided precise details about the device's location and suggested alternative targets, 3 safe houses where government rats were supposedly hiding. Elena realized she hadn't just saved a drug lord, she'd handed him a weapon. Days blurred together in a haze of internal investigations and polygraph tests. Elena passed them all, her training as an intelligence analyst serving her well. She controlled her breathing, regulated her heartbeat, compartmentalized her guilt. The anonymous call had been routed through multiple international servers, untraceable. No evidence connected her to the leak, but Webb suspected. Elena saw it in the way he watched her during briefings, the subtle changes in her assignments. Her security clearance remained intact, but the most sensitive cases gradually disappeared from her desk. 3 months later, she requested a transfer to the Witness Protection Coordination Office in Albuquerque, a lateral move that raised no suspicions, just another burned-out field analyst seeking less dangerous work. Webb approved it personally, perhaps relieved to have his suspected mole relocated where she could do less damage. Elena told herself the transfer was strategic, temporary. She'd serve a few quiet years helping witnesses relocate, then return to active intelligence work. She'd make amends through service, protecting innocent people from the violence she'd inadvertently enabled. 23 years later, she was still in Albuquerque. Her corner office on the fourth floor of the federal building had become both sanctuary and prison. Through bulletproof windows, she watched the Sandia Mountains catch the morning light while reviewing files of people who needed new lives, new names, new chances. People running from cartels, from organized crime, from the consequences of telling dangerous truths. People like she should have been. Elena had never entered witness protection herself, but she'd lived like a protected witness anyway. Minimal social connections. No romantic relationships that lasted beyond casual dating. Her daughter Sophia, now 16, knew nothing about her mother's real work beyond the sanitized cover story about helping crime victims. The irony wasn't lost on Elena. She'd spent 2 decades erasing other people's identities while burying her own beneath layers of routine and professional competence. Her colleagues saw her as dedicated, thorough, unflappable. They had no idea she reviewed each case, wondering if she was granting innocence the fresh start she'd denied herself. Some nights, when insomnia claimed her, Elena searched news reports for El Chapo's latest atrocities. Each death toll felt like a weight added to invisible scales she could never balance. The tunnel escapes, the murdered journalists, the countless lives destroyed by the empire she'd helped preserve. All of it traced back to 11 minutes before midnight on March 15, 1997. But children were children, she reminded herself. She'd saved 3 innocent girls, even if it cost 3 innocent agents. That was the lie Elena told herself, until the morning a package arrived that would destroy everything she thought she knew about that terrible night. The morning she discovered that among those 3 dead agents was someone who should have come home. Someone she'd spent 23 years believing was still alive. Introduction. Elena Vasquez stood at her office window, watching the November snow dust the Sandia Mountains like powdered sugar on dark bread. The federal building hummed with Monday morning energy 4 floors below, but her corner office remained a pocket of careful quiet. She pressed her palm against the bulletproof glass, feeling the cold seep through. 23 years, and she still counted sunrises like a sentence being served. Her reflection stared back, a woman of 54 who'd learned to armor herself in neutral colors and measured expressions. Gray blazer, sensible heels, dark hair pulled into the same efficient bun she'd worn since transferring to Albuquerque. She'd perfected the art of being professionally invisible, memorable only for her competence. The framed photo on her desk drew her attention as it did every morning. Sophia at 15, laughing on the steps of the Natural History Museum, her father's dark eyes bright with teenage mischief. Elena's greatest vulnerability and her only real joy, wrapped in denim and defiance. Sophia thought her mother helped crime victims relocate for safety, a sanitized truth that let Elena sleep at night, most nights anyway. Her secure phone buzzed. Elena moved to her desk, passing walls lined with certificates of appreciation from grateful families whose identities she'd erased, whose lives she'd rebuilt from scratch. Each one represented someone who'd found the courage to start over. Each one reminded her of the fresh start she'd never claimed. Elena Vasquez, Witness Protection Coordination. Morning, Elena. It's Marcus Webb. Her hand tightened on the receiver. Her former supervisor's voice carried the same authority that had filled DEA briefing rooms decades ago, though retirement had softened his edges. They spoke perhaps twice a year now, Christmas, and whenever old ghosts demanded attention. Marcus, this is unexpected. I'm calling about the anniversary. 23 years next month since Culiacan. A pause heavy with shared history. The FBI's reopening the investigation. New forensic techniques for analyzing those intercepted communications. They're reviewing all personnel who had access to the original intelligence. Elena sank into her chair, muscle memory from years of controlled responses keeping her voice steady. After all this time? Fresh eyes, new technology. You know how it goes. Webb's tone remained neutral, but Elena heard the warning beneath. Thought you should know they might reach out. Routine follow-up interviews with the original team. Through her window, Elena watched federal employees hurrying across the plaza, wrapped in coats and ordinary Monday morning concerns. None of them carried the weight of 11 minutes that had changed everything. None of them had spent decades wondering if mercy and betrayal were sometimes the same thing. Elena? You there? Yes. Thank you for the heads up. How's Sophia? Still giving you trouble about college applications? The question was kind, normal, the sort of thing a family friend might ask. Webb had never married, never had children, but he'd watched Sophia grow up through Elena's careful updates over the years, becoming something like an honorary uncle from a distance. She wants to study journalism. Elena allowed herself a small smile. Specifically investigative reporting. Says she wants to expose corruption and speak truth to power. Webb chuckled, but Elena heard concern underneath. Wonder where she gets that instinct. From her father, Elena thought, but didn't say. From the man Sophia had never met, whose own dedication to truth had carved holes in both their lives. Teenagers. They think they can save the world. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe the world needs more people who think they can save it. After Webb hung up, Elena sat in the growing silence of her office. Her hands, steady throughout the call, began to tremble. She pulled open her desk drawer and withdrew a small wooden box, sandalwood, a gift from Sophia's father before everything fell apart. Inside lay a few precious things. Sophia's first baby tooth, a pressed flower from her parents' wedding bouquet, and a letter she'd never sent. The letter was addressed to Agent David Morales, DEA Deep Cover Operations. She'd written it 6 months after Culiacan, when the guilt had become unbearable and she'd decided to confess everything. But she'd never found the courage to send it. David was somewhere deep undercover, risking his life in cartel territory. Her conscience wasn't worth compromising his safety. She'd kept writing letters over the years, updates about Sophia's first steps, lost teeth, school plays, soccer games, all the moments a father should witness, all the moments David was missing for the sake of some operation Elena wasn't cleared to know about. The letters remained unsent, but writing them had become a ritual of hope. Elena touched the latest letter, written just last week. Sophia got her driver's license. She's beautiful and fierce and everything we dreamed she'd be. She asks about you sometimes. I tell her you're working somewhere far away, keeping people safe. It's not a lie, is it? The morning light shifted, casting new shadows across her desk. Somewhere in the building, people were preparing to disappear forever, trading their histories for safety. Elena envied them, their clean breaks, their official permission to become someone new. She closed the wooden box and returned it to its drawer. In 2 hours, Sophia would call during her lunch break, full of complaints about calculus and excitement about the winter dance. Elena would listen and laugh and pretend her biggest worry was teenage drama. She had no idea that 23 floors below, a package was already making its way through federal security, a package that would shatter every careful lie she'd built her life upon. Inciting incident. Elena had just opened her first case file of the morning when Janet knocked on her doorframe. Her assistant's usually cheerful demeanor seemed muted, uncertain. Sorry to interrupt, but a package came through security for you. Hand-delivered about an hour ago. Janet held a manila envelope, standard size, unremarkable except for the careful way she gripped it. No return address. Security ran it through the scanners twice. Elena's stomach tightened, though she kept her expression neutral. Anonymous packages didn't arrive at federal witness protection offices. Everything went through multiple channels, official protocols, tracked chains of custody. Who delivered it? Courier service. The driver said it came through their overnight system, but when security called to verify, the company had no record of pickup or delivery instructions, no payment record either. Janet's frown deepened. The duty officer wanted to reject it entirely, but it's addressed specifically to you. Personal and confidential. Elena extended her hand, fighting the urge to hesitate. The envelope felt heavier than it should, as if it contained more than paper. Her name was written across the front in block letters, black ink, precise and deliberate. Elena Vasquez, personal. Thank you, Janet. Could you hold my calls for a few minutes? After Janet left, Elena turned the envelope over in her hands. No postmark, no shipping labels, no identifying marks beyond her name. 23 years of helping people disappear had taught her to recognize the weight of secrets. This felt like something that had been buried and deliberately unearthed. She sliced the envelope open with her letter knife. Inside lay a single photograph and a folded piece of paper. Elena's hands began to shake before her mind could process what she was seeing. The photograph showed Sophia at 16, taken recently outside her high school. Her daughter stood laughing with friends near the main entrance, backpack slung over one shoulder, completely unaware she was being watched. The image was crisp, professional quality, shot from across the street with a telephoto lens. Elena's breath caught. Sophia's school was 20 miles away. She'd driven her daughter there herself that very morning. With trembling fingers, Elena unfolded the paper. The message was brief, typed on plain white stock. The debt is paid, the favor is returned. You saved 3 children in Culiacan. Now someone has saved yours. But debts work both ways, Elena. Your brother David didn't come home because of the choice you made. The bomb you helped redirect killed the wrong people. It killed the right people. He was Agent Martinez. Deep cover. The church wasn't random. Check the Culiacan file. The real one. Elena's vision blurred. The photograph slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the floor like a broken promise. David. Her brother David. Agent Martinez. The room tilted around her as 23 years of carefully constructed reality crumbled. David hadn't been missing. He hadn't been deep undercover in some indefinite operation she wasn't cleared to know about. He'd been dead. Dead since March 16, 1997. Dead because of a bomb that detonated outside a Catholic church in Culiacan. A bomb that had been redirected because of her warning. Elena lunged for her secure computer terminal, fingers flying across the keyboard. She accessed the classified archives, pulling up the Culiacan incident file. Her security clearance, unused for this purpose in decades, still granted her access to the original intelligence reports. There, buried in the casualty list she'd never had the courage to examine closely, was Agent Roberto Martinez, deep cover asset embedded with suspected cartel money laundering operation. Killed in explosive device attack, March 16, 1997. Elena cross-referenced the dates. David Morales had officially gone dark on February 2, 1997. Roberto Martinez had established his cover identity on February 15, 1997. The timeline matched perfectly. Her brother had been one of the 3 agents whose covers were blown when El Chapo used her intelligence to redirect the bomb. David had been inside that church, probably meeting with a contact, when the explosion tore through the morning congregation. He'd died thinking his own sister had betrayed him. Because she had. Elena's phone rang, the sound sharp in the suddenly suffocating silence of her office. She stared at it, unable to move, until voicemail picked up. Then it rang again, and again. On the 4th ring, she answered without checking the caller ID. Elena? Sophia's voice, bright with 16-year-old energy. Mom, you sound weird. Are you okay? Elena looked down at the photograph of her daughter, at evidence that someone had been watching, following, documenting. Someone who knew exactly who she was and what she'd done. Someone who'd spent 23 years letting her believe David was still alive before choosing this moment to destroy that last precious lie. Mom? I'm here, sweetheart. Elena's voice came from somewhere far away, automated responses from muscle memory. Just busy morning, but she wasn't busy. She was shattered. And whoever had sent this package, whoever had saved her daughter while revealing her brother's death, wasn't finished with her yet. The debt was paid, the note had said. But debts work both ways. Elena hung up and stared at the photograph until her tears made Sophia's face blur beyond recognition. Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and forced herself to focus. 23 years of witness protection work had taught her that panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. People who panicked made mistakes. People who made mistakes died. She gathered the photograph and note, slipping them back into the manila envelope. Her movements felt mechanical, distant, as if she were watching someone else's hands perform these careful actions. The envelope went into her desk drawer, locked away beneath files and forgotten paperwork. Normal. She needed to appear normal. Elena pulled up her appointment calendar and began reviewing the day's schedule. Mrs. Chen at 10, a grandmother whose testimony had dismantled a human trafficking ring. The Morrison family at 2, father, mother, teenage twins, all needing new identities after witnessing a mob execution. Routine cases, routine problems. The kind of work that had filled her days for 2 decades while she waited for David to come home. David who was never coming home. David who had been dead since she was 28 years old, writing letters to a ghost. Her secure phone rang. Elena stared at the display until the 4th ring, then answered with practiced professionalism. Elena Vasquez, Witness Protection Coordination. Elena, it's Marcus again. Webb's voice carried a tension that hadn't been there an hour earlier. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer carefully. Have you had any unusual contact recently? Anything that seemed off? Elena's grip tightened on the receiver. What kind of contact? The kind that might suggest someone's been asking questions about old cases. About Culiacan specifically. A pause. I just got a call from FBI counterintelligence. Someone accessed classified files from the Culiacan investigation this morning. The system flagged it as unusual activity. Heat flooded Elena's cheeks. Her own security clearance. Her own search for David's real identity. Marcus, the access came from your terminal, Elena. At 9:47 a.m. She closed her eyes. 17 minutes ago, when her world had collapsed and she desperately needed proof that David Martinez and David Morales were the same person. Proof that her brother had died because of her warning. I can explain. Not over the phone. Clear your afternoon. I'm driving down from Santa Fe. The line went dead. Elena stared at the receiver, wondering how many other mistakes she was about to make. Webb's retirement hadn't dulled his instincts for operational security. If he was willing to drive 2 hours for a face-to-face conversation, the situation was already spiraling beyond her control. Janet appeared in her doorway, clipboard in hand, but stopped when she saw Elena's face. Everything okay? You look pale. Cancel my afternoon appointments, Elena said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Family emergency. Reschedule Mrs. Chen for tomorrow and see if the Morrison briefing can be handled by Richardson's team. Of course. Anything I can... No. The word came out sharper than intended. Elena softened her tone. Thank you, but no. Just hold all calls except emergencies. After Janet left, Elena walked to her window and watched the morning crowd thin as people settled into their offices and routines. Somewhere out there, someone had photographed her daughter. Someone who knew Elena's real name, her real history, the real reason she'd spent 23 years hiding in plain sight. Her cell phone buzzed. Sophia, texting from school, forgot lunch money again. Can you transfer $20? Love you, Mom. Elena typed back quickly. Done. Have a good day, sweetheart. But as she initiated the transfer through her banking app, Elena realized how exposed they were. Bank accounts, credit cards, school records, medical files. All the digital breadcrumbs that made modern life possible but anonymity impossible. If someone wanted to track her family, to watch Sophia, to document their routines, she thought about the photograph again. Professional quality, taken with expensive equipment from a safe distance, not the work of an amateur or opportunist, someone with resources, someone with patience, someone who'd waited 23 years to collect a debt. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for her desk drawer, needing another look at the note. But as she turned the key, footsteps approached her office. Quick, purposeful strides that didn't match Janet's usual measured pace. Ma'am? A voice she didn't recognize. Elena looked up to see a young man in a dark suit standing in her doorway. Clean-cut, forgettable features, the kind of face that belonged to federal agents everywhere. Special Agent Morrison, FBI counterintelligence. I need to speak with you about some unusual system access this morning. Elena's mouth went dry. Webb was still an hour away, and the FBI was already here. Either they considered this a serious security breach, or someone had been monitoring her activities more closely than she'd realized. Of course, she said, closing her desk drawer without opening it. Please, come in. But as Agent Morrison stepped into her office and quietly closed the door behind him, Elena noticed something that made her blood run cold. He wasn't alone. Through her window, she could see 2 more agents in the plaza below, positioned where they could watch the building's exits. She wasn't being interviewed. She was being contained. Agent Morrison settled into the chair across from Elena's desk with the careful precision of someone accustomed to hostile interviews. His eyes swept the office, taking inventory of exits, sightlines, personal items that might reveal leverage points. Ms. Vasquez, at 9:47 this morning, your security credentials were used to access classified files related to Operation Culiacan. The system flagged this as unusual because those files haven't been touched in over 15 years. His tone remained conversational, but Elena recognized the interrogation technique. Start friendly, establish facts, then tighten the noose. Can you explain your sudden interest in a decades-old case? Elena forced herself to maintain eye contact. I received a request for historical precedent information. Sometimes our current witnesses have cases that overlap with older investigations. From whom? The question hung between them like a blade. Elena realized she'd walked into a trap of her own making. Any specific name would be checked. Any vague answer would raise suspicion. Agent Morrison was already taking notes, his pen moving with the methodical patience of someone building a case. I'd need to check my files to give you the exact details. Please do. Elena reached for her desk drawer, then stopped. The manila envelope lay inches from her fingertips, containing evidence that someone had been watching her daughter. Evidence that would raise questions she couldn't answer without revealing everything. Her hand hovered over the drawer handle while Morrison watched with predatory stillness. Actually, let me check my computer files first. More efficient. But as Elena turned to her terminal, Morrison leaned forward slightly. Ms. Vasquez, in my experience, people who access old classified files usually fall into two categories: those who've received new information that requires historical context, and those who've discovered something that changes their understanding of past events. His voice remained pleasant, almost sympathetic. Which category would you say you fall into? The question was a scalpel, precise and cutting. Elena felt exposed, as if Morrison could see through 23 years of careful deception to the terrified young woman who'd made one phone call that destroyed everything. I'm not sure I understand the distinction. Morrison smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Let me be more direct. The Culiacan bombing has been classified as a closed case since 1999. No new evidence, no ongoing investigations, no pending prosecutions. Yet this morning, for the first time in 15 years, someone with administrative access pulled the complete case file, including casualty lists and deep cover asset identities. He paused, letting the implications settle. That suggests either you've received information that reopens the case, or you've realized something about your own connection to it. Elena's throat tightened. Morrison wasn't fishing. He was closing in on something specific. The federal building security protocols meant every keystroke was logged, every file access tracked and analyzed. Her desperate search for David's identity had left digital fingerprints across a case that was supposed to remain buried. Agent Morrison, I think there may be some misunderstanding. Were you aware that Agent Roberto Martinez was actually Agent David Morales operating under deep cover? The words hit Elena like physical blows. Morrison knew. Somehow he knew about David, about the connection, about the reason she'd accessed those files. But his tone suggested he was testing her reaction rather than stating confirmed facts. I'm sorry. Those names aren't familiar to me. Agent Morales went missing in February 1997. Approximately 1 month before the Culiacan bombing. His family was told he was on an extended deep cover assignment with no communication protocol. Morrison consulted his notes. His emergency contact was listed as Elena Morales, sister, employed by DEA Intelligence Division. Elena's hands went numb. Her maiden name, her old employment records, the connection she thought she'd buried when she took her ex-husband's surname and transferred to witness protection. Morrison wasn't investigating a security breach. He was investigating her. Agent Morrison, I think I should contact my supervisor before... Your supervisor is Marcus Webb, retired DEA, currently consulting with FBI on historical case reviews. He's the one who flagged your file access as potentially significant. Morrison's smile turned sharp. Ms. Vasquez, we're not here because you broke protocol. We're here because your search this morning suggests you've received information about your brother's death that you didn't have before. The room seemed to contract around Elena. Webb hadn't called to warn her. He'd called to assess what she knew before turning her over to the FBI. 23 years of trust, of carefully maintained friendship, dissolved in an instant. Someone contacted you, didn't they? Morrison continued. Someone who knew about the connection between David Morales and Roberto Martinez. Someone who wanted you to know that your brother died in Culiacan. Elena stared at him, unable to speak. The manila envelope in her drawer felt radioactive, burning through wood and metal and skin. Morrison knew about David. which meant he might know about the warning, which meant he might know everything. The question, Morrison said softly, is who told you and what they want in return. Elena's breath caught as the weight of Morrison's question settled over her like a shroud. The manila envelope in her drawer seemed to pulse with accusation, but suddenly its contents felt less important than the trap closing around her. She studied Morrison's face, searching for tells, for any indication of how much he actually knew versus how much he was fishing for. "Agent Morrison," she said carefully, "I think you're operating under some assumptions that may not be accurate." "Am I?" He leaned back, confidence radiating from every line of his body. "Let me share what I know for certain. 3 hours ago, someone sent a package to this office. Our surveillance picked up the delivery. Unmarked van, no plates, driver who knew exactly how to avoid the security cameras. Professional work." His smile widened, the kind of operational sophistication that suggests cartel involvement. Elena's stomach dropped. They'd been watching, not just monitoring her computer access, but conducting active surveillance of her building, her deliveries, her life. "You've been monitoring my office?" "We've been monitoring communications related to the Culiacan case for 23 years, Ms. Vasquez. Today was the first time anyone tried to make contact." Morrison pulled out a tablet, swiping to what looked like surveillance footage. "Would you like to see the delivery? Happened at 8:32 a.m. Professional courier, knew the building layout, left a package specifically addressed to Elena Morales." The name hit her like a physical blow. Not Elena Vasquez, Witness Protection Coordinator. Elena Morales, the young DEA analyst who'd made one terrible phone call in 1997. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Is it? Because from where I sit, it looks like someone's been waiting a very long time to settle an old debt. Someone who knows exactly who you are and what you did." Morrison leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Someone who knows you warned El Chapo about that car bomb." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Elena felt the blood drain from her face as 23 years of carefully constructed security crumbled around her. Morrison wasn't investigating a security breach. He was springing a trap that had been decades in the making. "I don't know what you're talking about." The phone call, Elena. March 15, 1997, 11:47 p.m. Anonymous tip to a number connected to Guzman's organization, warning about a car bomb set to detonate the following morning. Morrison's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "We've had the recording all these years, but the voice was distorted, untraceable. Until voice recognition technology improved enough to run it against federal employee databases." Elena's vision tunneled. They had the recording. After all these years, all her careful hiding, they had actual proof of the call that had started everything. "You saved his life," Morrison continued. "And he used your warning to redirect that bomb to the church where your brother was meeting his contact. 3 innocent people died instead of one cartel leader, including Agent David Morales, operating under the identity Roberto Martinez." "Stop." The word came out as a broken whisper. "The beautiful irony is that Guzman probably never knew he was killing your brother. Just redirected the threat to eliminate some undercover agents who were getting too close. But someone figured it out, didn't they? Someone put the pieces together and decided you needed to know the truth." Elena gripped the edges of her desk, fighting against the nausea rising in her throat. Morrison's arrogance was breathtaking. He thought he understood what had happened, thought he could map the emotional landscape of her choices and their consequences. But he was wrong about one crucial thing. "You think someone else told me," she said, her voice gaining strength. "You think I didn't know." Morrison's confident expression flickered for just a moment. "What? You think I've spent 23 years believing my brother was still alive, that someone had to enlighten me about his death, about what my warning did?" Elena stood slowly, feeling something cold and sharp crystallizing in her chest. "You think I was living in ignorant bliss until this morning, weren't you?" Elena opened her desk drawer and withdrew the manila envelope. Morrison's eyes tracked the movement, but he made no move to stop her. She placed the photograph of Sophia on the desk between them, face up. "I've known David was dead since 1997, she said quietly. "I've known exactly how he died and why. I've lived with that knowledge every single day for 23 years, Agent Morrison. What I didn't know was that someone had been watching my daughter. Morrison's confidence cracked as he stared at the photograph. For the first time since entering her office, he looked uncertain. The package wasn't sent to inform me, Elena continued. It was sent to threaten me. Someone wants something, and they're using my family as leverage. The question isn't what they told me about the past. The question is what they want me to do now. Morrison's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon before stopping. The photograph of Sophia stared up at them both, a 17-year-old girl caught in perfect focus, unaware she was being watched by someone with the patience and resources to wait over 2 decades. "You've known," he repeated, as if testing the words. "For 23 years you've known your warning killed your brother, and you said nothing. What was I supposed to say?" Elena's voice carried a bitter edge that surprised them both. "That I made a phone call that got my brother murdered? That I've been living under witness protection not because I was threatened, but because I was complicit? That every person I've helped disappear over the years was my attempt to balance the scales?" Morrison reached for his tablet, fingers moving rapidly across the screen. "This changes everything. If you've been operating with this knowledge, if you've been in contact." "I haven't been in contact with anyone." Elena slammed her palm against the desk, and Morrison's hand moved toward his weapon again. "Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I would risk my daughter's life to maintain some connection to the cartels that destroyed my family? Then explain the photograph." Elena picked up the image, studying Sophia's face with the desperate intensity of a mother realizing how vulnerable her child really was. "Someone's been watching us, learning our routines, our vulnerabilities. This wasn't taken yesterday. Look at her haircut, her jacket. This is from 3 weeks ago when she was walking home from school." Morrison leaned forward to examine the photo more closely. The angle suggests it was taken from the coffee shop across from Jefferson High. Professional equipment, telephoto lens. But why wait 3 weeks to send it? Because they weren't ready yet. Elena felt pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. Someone's been planning this for months, maybe years. The surveillance, the research, the perfect timing to coincide with your investigation. This isn't coincidence, Morrison. Someone wanted you here, in this room, having this conversation. The agent's face paled as the implications settled over him. "You think we're being played?" "I think we're dancing to someone else's music and we don't even know the song." Elena walked to her window, noting the 2 agents still positioned in the plaza below. "Your surveillance picked up the delivery van this morning, right? Unmarked, no plates, professional driver?" "Yes. And yet somehow you had agents in position to watch my building before the package was even delivered. How long have you been monitoring me, Morrison?" The question hung between them like an accusation. Morrison's confident interrogation technique was crumbling as he realized the control he'd thought he possessed was an illusion. "The Culiacan case has been under periodic review." "That's not an answer." Elena turned from the window, her expression sharp with newfound understanding. "Someone called you. Someone provided intelligence that led you to monitor my office, to flag my computer access, to position agents before any actual threat materialized. Who was your source?" Morrison's silence was answer enough. Elena felt the last pieces of the puzzle sliding into place with sickening clarity. "They wanted you here," she said softly. "Whoever sent this photograph, they needed federal agents on scene when I received it. They needed witnesses, documentation, official involvement." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "They needed me to be arrested. Elena." "No, listen to me." She moved back to her desk, placing both hands flat against its surface. "For 23 years, I've been invisible, hidden in plain sight, processing other people's disappearances while living my own. But suddenly I'm exposed, threatened, and under federal investigation all in the same morning. That's not coincidence. That's orchestration." Morrison stood slowly, his earlier confidence replaced by something approaching fear. "If someone's manipulating federal resources to target you specifically, we need to consider the possibility that this office has been compromised for longer than we thought." Elena's blood ran cold. The witness protection files, the safe house locations, the identities of hundreds of people whose lives depended on absolute security. all potentially exposed if someone had been patient enough to plan this level of infiltration. My access codes could have been monitored for months, she said. Every file I've accessed, every case I've handled, every person I've helped disappear. The magnitude of the potential breach was staggering. Morrison, if I've been compromised, so has everyone I've ever protected. The agent was already reaching for his phone when Elena's landline rang. The sharp sound cut through the growing tension like a blade. They stared at each other for a moment before Elena slowly lifted the receiver. Vasquez, Witness Protection Coordination. The voice that answered was distorted, mechanically altered, but unmistakably confident. Hello, Elena. Are you ready to discuss what happens next? Morrison was already signaling frantically to the agents below, but Elena knew with cold certainty that whoever was calling had planned for that too. The game was about to begin in earnest. Elena gripped the phone with steady hands, her eyes locked on Morrison as the distorted voice continued. I assume Agent Morrison is listening. Good. This conversation requires witnesses. Morrison had his phone out, frantically texting what Elena assumed were instructions to trace the call. The irony wasn't lost on her. After decades of helping others disappear, she was now the one being hunted by someone who understood the system's vulnerabilities better than she did. What do you want? Elena asked. Justice. Or perhaps revenge. The distinction becomes blurred after 23 years. The mechanical distortion couldn't hide the speaker's careful cadence, the deliberate pacing of someone who had rehearsed this moment. Tell me, Elena, do you remember the last thing your brother said to you before he disappeared into deep cover? Elena's breath caught. No one knew about that conversation except David and herself. She'd never reported it, never documented it, never even told Webb. Yet somehow this stranger possessed intimate knowledge of her most private moments. He said he'd see me when it was over, she whispered. And what did you promise him in return? The question hit her like a physical blow. Elena closed her eyes, transported back to February 1997, to David's cramped apartment where he'd explained his assignment to infiltrate the Sinaloa cartel's money laundering operation. She could still see his face, young and determined and terrified, as he made her swear to stay away from anything cartel-related while he was gone. I promised I wouldn't interfere with his mission, and yet 1 month later you made a phone call that got him killed. Morrison was watching her with sharp attention, taking notes as the conversation unfolded. Elena realized that everything she said was being recorded, documented, analyzed for prosecution. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a confession being extracted with surgical precision. I didn't know he was there, Elena said, her voice breaking. I didn't know about the church, about the meeting. I was trying to prevent violence, not cause it. But you knew the consequences of warning Guzman. You understood that saving one life might cost others. You made a choice, Elena. You decided your conscience was worth more than your brother's life. The accusation hung in the air like a death sentence. Elena felt Morrison's stare burning into her, saw the agents outside moving into new positions through her window. Everyone was waiting for her response, for her to either deny or confirm the guilt she'd carried for over 2 decades. You're right, she said quietly. Morrison's pen stopped moving. The voice on the phone fell silent. Elena's admission seemed to echo in the small office, years of buried truth finally exposed to daylight. I made a choice, Elena continued, her voice gaining strength. I chose to trust my instincts over my training. I chose compassion over protocol. I chose to save a life instead of letting someone die, even though that someone was a monster. And yes, that choice killed my brother. It's killed me every day since. The mechanical voice resumed, but something in its tone had shifted. Do you know who I am, Elena? I know you're someone who's been patient enough to wait 23 years for this moment. Someone with access to classified records, federal communications, and detailed surveillance capabilities. Someone who understands both cartel operations and law enforcement protocols. Elena paused, pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. You're someone who was there when David died. Morrison looked up sharply from his notes. The admission that this was likely a first-hand witness to a federal agent's murder transformed the dynamic completely. This wasn't just about Elena's past choices. This was about an active threat from someone with intimate knowledge of classified operations. Very good, the voice said. I was Miguel Santos, Guzman's financial coordinator. The meeting your brother was attending was supposed to be with me. When the bomb was redirected to the church, I was running 10 minutes late because of traffic. Your brother died in my place. Elena felt the room spinning around her. Miguel Santos had been one of the most wanted men in Mexico throughout the late 1990s, Guzman's most trusted lieutenant, until he'd vanished completely after the Culiacan bombing. Intelligence had assumed he was dead, eliminated by rival cartels or internal power struggles. You've been in hiding too, she realized. All these years, you've been living under protection just like me. Not protection, planning, building resources, gathering intelligence, waiting for the right moment to balance the scales. His voice carried a cold satisfaction that chilled Elena's blood. You saved Guzman's life and destroyed mine. Everything I'd built, everyone I'd trusted, gone because of your phone call. So I decided to study you, Elena, to understand exactly what you'd cost me. Morrison was scribbling frantically now, probably recognizing the intelligence value of what they were hearing. But Elena understood with growing horror that Santos hadn't called to confess or negotiate. He'd called to deliver a final ultimatum. What do you want from me? I want you to understand what you took, Santos said. And I want you to lose exactly what I lost, everything. The line went dead with a finality that seemed to echo through Elena's bones. She set the receiver down with deliberate care, her hands steady despite the trembling she felt deep inside. Morrison was already barking orders into his phone, coordinating traces and alerts, but Elena knew it was futile. Santos had waited 23 years for this moment. He wouldn't leave loose ends. We need to get you into protective custody, Morrison said, ending his call. And your daughter? No. Elena's voice cut through his urgency like a blade. Sophia stays where she is, surrounded by normal life, normal people. The moment we move her, we confirm she's a target worth taking. Elena, this man just threatened your family. This man has been watching my family for months, maybe years. If he wanted Sophia dead, she'd already be gone. Elena moved to her filing cabinet, fingers dancing across combination locks with practiced efficiency. He wants something else. He wants me to suffer the way he suffered. She withdrew a thick folder, its edges worn from years of handling. Morrison watched as she spread photographs across her desk, crime scene images from Culiacan, surveillance photos of cartel operations, intelligence reports marked with David's handwriting in the margins. I've been investigating my brother's death for 23 years, Elena said quietly. Not officially, not through channels. Just collecting pieces, trying to understand what really happened in that church. Morrison leaned forward, studying the documents. This is classified material. How did you? 23 years in witness protection gives you access to a lot of files, Agent Morrison. And when you spend every day helping people disappear, you learn how to make information appear. Elena's finger traced a line connecting dates on a timeline she'd constructed. David wasn't just meeting with Santos. He was preparing to expose the entire financial network, dozens of shell companies, hundreds of millions in laundered money. He was close to bringing down the whole operation. He was close to ending a war. The intelligence he'd gathered could have crippled 3 different cartels, saved thousands of lives. Elena's voice carried the weight of decades of what-to-if scenarios. Instead, my phone call preserved the status quo. Guzman lived, the violence continued, and everything David died for became meaningless. Morrison studied the photographs of the bombing aftermath, his expression growing grim. The other victims in the church, they were all connected to the money laundering investigation? Local banker, parish priest who'd been asking questions about donations, and a journalist who'd been tracking suspicious real estate transactions. Elena pointed to each face in turn. Santos wasn't just meeting with David. He was planning to turn, to provide testimony in exchange for protection. My warning didn't just kill my brother. It eliminated the only chance we had to bring down the whole network peacefully. The weight of that realization settled between them like a physical presence. Elena had spent decades believing she'd made one terrible choice that killed one person she loved. The truth was infinitely worse. Her decision had cascaded through time, enabling years of violence that might otherwise have been prevented. Sophia was 3 years old when I entered witness protection, Elena said, her voice growing distant. I used to tell her bedtime stories about her Uncle David, the brave man who'd gone away to fight bad guys. I never told her he wasn't coming home. Morrison closed his notebook, the investigative portion of their encounter clearly over. What will you tell her now? Elena gathered the photographs, returning them to their folder with the reverent care of someone handling relics. The truth, I suppose, that sometimes good intentions create more harm than evil ones, that choices have consequences that ripple forward through time in ways we can never fully understand. She moved to the window, watching the afternoon shadows lengthen across the plaza where federal agents maintained their positions. Normal life continued around them, students walking home from school, office workers grabbing coffee, elderly couples feeding pigeons, all of them unaware that 23 years of carefully buried secrets were finally surfacing. Santos was right about one thing, Elena said. I need to understand what I took from him, what my choice cost everyone involved. And then? Elena smiled. And Morrison was struck by how much older she looked than when he'd first entered her office hours ago. The weight she'd been carrying had finally become visible, transforming her from a competent bureaucrat into someone who'd survived decades of impossible guilt. Then I do what I've been doing for 23 years, she said. I help someone disappear. Except this time, it's going to be me. Outside, clouds gathered over the Sandia Mountains, casting the late afternoon light in shades of amber and gold. Elena watched the city she'd called home for over 2 decades, knowing she was seeing it for the last time. Some debts, she understood now, could only be paid by vanishing completely. The girl who'd warned El Chapo was finally ready to face the consequences of her choice.